The roar of the crowd was a physical thing. It hit Cale in the chest like a drumbeat. The air smelled of hot metal, strange spices, and blood. He stood on the rough, sandy floor of the grand arena of Gore. He was not a big man. His clothes were the torn remains of a scientist's uniform, not a warrior's armor. All around him, in towering stands, were aliens of 100 different kinds. Some had scales, some had fur, some had too many eyes. They were all screaming. They were screaming for his blood. Across the arena, his opponent stirred. A Gron. It was a mountain of muscle and rage, standing 3 meters tall. It had 6 arms, each ending in claws like knives. Its skin was like gray rock. It beat 4 of its fists against its chest. The sound was like stones crashing together. It roared, showing rows of sharp yellow teeth. The crowd roared back even louder. Cale's mouth was dry. His heart hammered against his ribs. He was a xenobiologist. He studied life on other planets. He wrote reports. He did not fight monsters. He and his team were on a peaceful survey mission when the Zrignac warships appeared. There was a brief fight, then darkness. He woke up in a cell. And now, this. A loud clicking voice boomed from speakers high above. It was the arena announcer, a slender, insect-like alien. "Humans! Weak! Soft! They break so easily!" the announcer screeched. "But today a curious show! The human may choose how it meets its end! The human may pick its weapon!" A section of the arena wall slid open. Inside was a rack of weapons. They were alien, brutal things. A sword with a blade that crackled with purple energy. A heavy axe with hooks on it. A spear that seemed to be made of bone. Tools for making a messy, painful death. The Gron watched, drool dripping from its jaw. It knew the game. The little creature would pick a shiny toy. Then the Gron would break the toy, and then break the creature. Cale looked at the weapons. His mind, trained for science, raced. He knew about Grons from his studies. He remembered the data files. Species, Gron. Homeworld, high gravity, predatory. Pack hunters, now mostly solitary due to overhunting. Strength, extreme. Weakness, poor eyesight directly behind the cranial ridge. Vulnerable nerve cluster under the mandible. Knowledge. It was all he had. He did not walk to the weapon rack. He took a step forward, towards the center of the arena. He turned his back on the Gron, a dangerous move. He looked up, high up, to the most decorated box in the stands. There, surrounded by guards, sat Warlord Grax. Grax was the ruler of this sector. He was a Zrignac, tall and thin, with a hard, shell-like face and dark, compound eyes. He watched, silent and still, like a spider. Cale took a deep breath. He pushed his fear down into a cold, hard ball in his stomach. He needed his voice to be loud. He needed it to be calm. The announcer hissed, "Human, choose your weapon, or forfeit." Cale ignored him. He kept his eyes on Warlord Grax. He spoke. His voice did not boom. It did not shout, but it was clear. It cut through the noise of the crowd, and one by one the aliens fell silent, confused by this strange behavior. "Great Warlord Grax!" Cale called out. The few aliens still talking hushed. A human speaking directly to the Warlord? It was unheard of. Insane. "This Gron," Cale continued, his arm sweeping towards the beast behind him. "It is a powerful creature. A rare and strong specimen. You have hunted its kind to near extinction, yes? To have one here is a sign of your great power." He was flattering the Warlord, buying time, thinking. Grax leaned forward just a little, his head tilting. "Before this fight begins," Cale said, his words dropping like stones into the sudden quiet, I have a question for you. One choice. He paused. The entire arena held its breath. The Gron, confused by the silence, let out a low, questioning growl. Kael asked his question. His voice was firm, carrying to every corner of the giant stadium. Do you want a trophy? Or a pile of gore? Silence. Complete, total silence. For a long moment, there was no sound at all. No roar, no rustle, no breath. 10,000 alien faces stared, uncomprehending. The words hung in the air. Then, a whisper started in the crowd. What did it say? Trophy? Gore? What does the human mean? The warlord's compound eyes fixed on Kael. He slowly stood up from his seat. The speakers crackled to life with his voice, cold and sharp as broken glass. Explain your meaning, human. He did not yell, but his words were a command. Kael was now the absolute center of attention. The monster, the crowd, the most powerful being in the system, all waited for his next words. His life hung on his answer. He had stopped the arena with a question. Now he had to give an answer that would save his life. The silence was heavier than the gravity of Kael's homeworld. He could feel the weight of every alien eye. He could feel the hot, angry breath of the Gron on the back of his neck, but he kept his own eyes locked on Warlord Grax. A pile of gore is simple, Warlord, Kael said, his voice still calm. Any beast with enough anger can make one. Your arena is full of them. It is ordinary. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Ordinary? The bloody games were the highlight of the cycle. But a trophy? Kael paused, letting the word hang. A trophy is a story, a perfect, living Gron, captured not by a net or an army, but by a single, weaker creature, subdued by skill, not by strength, placed in your zoo or in your great hall for all to see. It does not just say you killed something. It says you had so much power, you chose to spare it. You controlled the violence so completely, you could afford to be graceful. Kael was weaving a story now, painting a picture. He was not selling his fighting skill. He was selling an idea to a tyrant who had everything except true admiration. You give the order for Gore, Kael said, nodding toward the weapon rack. I pick up a blade. The fight is bloody, quick, and messy. In 10 minutes, the cleaners are washing his blood away with the sand. You will forget it by tomorrow. He then turned and pointed at the Gron. The beast snorted, puffing up its chest. But you give the order for a trophy, and I go in with these. Kael held up his empty hands. They were a scientist's hands, with thin scars from tools, not swords. I use my mind, my knowledge. I will subdue this magnificent creature without killing it. I will give you a living prize, completely unharmed. The fight becomes a demonstration of your wisdom, of your control. The story will be told for 100 cycles. Do you remember when the warlord made a human turn the great arena into a hunting gallery? The warlord was utterly still. The crowd was eating it up. This was better than simple violence. This was drama. This was a new game. From his high box, Grax looked from the small, fragile human to the mountain of fury that was the Gron. The human's logic was intriguing. A living trophy would be a greater symbol. It would show his rivals a new level of cold, calculated dominance. The risk was that the human would fail and die in a boring way. But the reward— the Gron, tired of being talked about, slammed a fist into the sand and bellowed. The sound broke the spell. The crowd jumped, then laughed nervously. Grax's decision was made. His voice, cold and amplified, gave the verdict. You have a silver tongue for a soft creature. Very well. He leaned forward, his dark eyes glinting. You will give me a living trophy, a perfect specimen, unharmed. A cheer of excitement went up. This was unprecedented. But, Grax's voice sliced through the cheer, silencing it. If you fail, if you so much as leave a scratch on my trophy, or if it kills you, your failure will not be quick. A hologram flickered to life above the arena. It showed a Zrignak neural whip, a device of pure agony. You will be kept alive, and you will learn the true price of wasting my time. For 10 cycles, you will scream for the crowd. Do you understand your wager, human? Kyle's blood ran cold. 10 days of torture. A fate worse than a quick death in the Gron's jaws. He had painted himself into a corner. There was no backing out now. He swallowed hard, the dry click in his throat echoing in his own ears. He had one path forward. I understand, Kale said, his voice losing none of its firmness. The trophy will be yours. The warlord settled back into his throne. Then begin. The clock starts now. A deep, booming horn sounded. It was the start of hunt signal, not the start of fight signal. The game had changed. The Gron understood the horn. It understood the word trophy. It was not being challenged. It was being insulted. Its worth was being measured by a hairless ape. Rage, hot and pure, burned in its small, dark eyes. It was not just going to kill this human. It was going to erase him from existence. It did not charge with blind anger this time. It dropped into a low, predator's crouch. It began to circle Kyle, 6 arms spread wide, cutting off escape routes. It was smart. It was hunting. Kale had no weapon, no plan except the theory in his head. He had to study the beast, find its rhythm, its tells. He had to fight without fighting. He mirrored the Gron, stepping sideways, keeping his distance. The sand shifted under his boots. The crowd's cheers faded into a low, tense hum. All that existed was the circle of sand, the monster, and the impossible task. The Gron made the first move. It was not a full charge, but a testing lunge with its upper left arm, claws swiping through the air where Kyle's head had been a second before. Kyle had ducked, feeling the wind of the blow. Kyle hit the sand in a clumsy roll. Sharp claws whistled through the air above him, missing by a finger's width. Grit filled his mouth. The crowd's roar was a distant ocean. His whole world was the 6-armed shadow above him. He didn't try to stand. He scrambled sideways like a crab, just as a massive fist smashed the spot where he had landed. The impact sent a tremor through the arena floor. Observe. Don't fight. His scientist's mind screamed the order. You cannot win its game. Make it play yours. The Gron was fast, but it moved in patterns. It led with its upper right arms, its strongest. The lower left pair, especially the one with an old, knotted scar across the shoulder, was slower, stiff, a weakness. Kyle got to his feet, his breath coming in short gasps. He didn't run away. He took 2 quick steps toward the Gron's left side. The beast swung its powerful right arms. Kyle dropped into a slide under the blow, skidding past the Gron's tree trunk legs. He popped up behind it. For a second, he was in the blind spot, directly behind the Gron's wide, bony head ridge. The Gron snarled in frustration, turning clumsily. It was not used to prey that got behind it. Kyle didn't attack. He backed away, putting distance between them again. He was not trying to hurt it. He was mapping it. The crowd began to boo. This was not a fight. Where was the blood? The human was running like a scared animal. The Gron, feeding off the crowd's displeasure, charged. It was a full, roaring charge, all its weight behind it. Kyle's heart leaped into his throat. He couldn't outrun it. At the last second, he juked to the left, toward the beast's scarred, weaker arm. The Gron tried to adjust, but its left side was indeed slower. Its claw grazed Kale's tunic, ripping fabric but not skin. Kale spun from the force of the near miss and saw his chance. As the Gron's momentum carried it a step past him, Kale lunged forward and delivered a single, sharp, precise strike. Not to the body, not to the eyes. He used the edge of his hand, putting all his weight behind it, and struck the exact spot under the Gron's jaw, the nerve cluster from his research. It was like hitting rock. Pain shot up Kyle's arm, but the Gron's roar cut off into a choked gurk. It stumbled, shaking its huge head, confusion in its eyes. The blow hadn't hurt it. It had short-circuited it. For a moment, its body wasn't listening. The booing stopped. The arena watched, silent and puzzled. The Gron backed away, blinking. It touched its jaw with one of its smaller hands. It looked at Kyle not with simple rage, but with something new, suspicion. This soft thing had done something strange, something that didn't cause pain but took control away. Kyle stood his ground, his hand throbbing. "See," he said, his voice low, meant only for the beast. "I do not want to hurt you." He knew it couldn't understand the words, but maybe it could understand the tone, the lack of follow-up attack. Warlord Grax's voice crackled over the speaker, cold with displeasure. "This is a hunt, human, not a clinic. Make it interesting, or I will end it myself." The command broke the moment. The Gron, reminded of its audience, of its shame, buried its confusion under fresh anger. It would not be tricked again. It changed tactics. It did not charge. Instead, it dropped its 4 lower arms to the ground and used its 2 massive upper arms to tear a huge, jagged slab of stone from the arena's edge. The muscles in its back corded with the effort. Kale's blood went cold. Ranged attack. He had no cover. The Gron hefted the slab, took aim, and threw it. It wasn't a fast throw, but it was big. The shadow of the rock fell over Kale. He dove to the side. The slab shattered where he had stood, spraying sharp fragments. Before Kyle could get up, the Gron had another rock. And another. It was methodical now, cornering him. Kyle ran, zigzagging across the sand as chunks of stone exploded around him. One fragment sliced his cheek. Another hit his shoulder, making him grunt in pain. He was being herded. He looked over his shoulder, his lungs burning. The Gron was not chasing. It was standing by the broken wall, a pile of rubble at its feet, a rock in each upper hand. A cruel, calculating look was in its eyes. It was an engineer of destruction. Kyle was trapped in the open, halfway across the arena. The Gron drew back both arms to throw. There was no way to dodge both. The Gron let the rocks fly. One came high, one came low. They spun through the air, covering Kyle's escape routes. He had 1 second to decide, left or right. Either way, a crushing impact waited. He braced himself, the taste of dust and blood in his mouth. This was it. The scholar's dance was over. There was no good choice. The high rock would crush his head. The low one would shatter his legs. Instinct, not thought, took over. Kyle did not go left or right. He leaped forward, into the deadly space between the two flying stones. He threw himself into a desperate headlong dive, his body flat to the sand. The air above him screamed as the high rock passed. The ground beneath him shuddered as the low one struck just behind his boots, spraying him with dirt. He slid to a stop, his chest heaving. For a moment, there was only the sound of his own pounding heart. Then the crowd erupted. It was not a cheer of bloodlust, but of pure shock. They had never seen such a move. It was impossible. It was human. The Grand stared, its rock-filled hands hanging at its sides. Its prey was supposed to be paste. Instead, the human was lying there, alive, staring right back at him. Kyle pushed himself up. Every muscle screamed. His shoulder was a dull throb where the fragment had hit him. But he was alive. And in the Grand's moment of stunned confusion, he saw not a monster, but a creature. He saw the old scar on its shoulder, thick and white. He saw the slight hitch in its step when it moved its left legs. He saw the intelligence in its dark eyes, now clouded with frustration. This wasn't just a beast. It was a survivor, like him, trapped in someone else's game. The warlord's voice was a venomous crackle. "Enough! This farce is over. The human is a coward who only runs and hides. I have lost my patience." He rose from his throne, his form dark against the bright arena lights. "Kill it, human. Now, I have changed my mind. I no longer want a trophy. Give me the Gore." The final word echoed, a death sentence for both of them. The crowd roared its approval. They wanted the promised blood after all. The command hit the Grand like a whip. The confusion vanished, replaced by a simple, programmed fury. Its purpose was restored. Destroy. Its body tensed, ready for the final violent charge. Kale looked from the warlord's box to the Grand. A cold calm settled over him. He was out of time, out of tricks. He had one last card to play, and it wasn't a weapon. It was an idea, a terrible, dangerous idea. He turned his back on the Grand. The arena gasped as one. It was the ultimate insult, the final surrender. The Grand, enraged by the gesture, took a deep breath and bellowed, lowering its head to charge and trample the human into the sand. But Kyle didn't face the beast. He faced the warlord. He took a step toward the luxury box, his empty hands raised, not in surrender, but in defiance. "I will not," Kale said. His voice was ragged but clear, cutting through the Grand's roar. "You gave your word, warlord. A deal is a deal. You asked for a hunt. The hunt is over. The prize is won." He was calling the most powerful being in the sector a liar, in front of everyone. The silence that fell was absolute and electric. Even the Grand hesitated, its charge faltering. It had never seen anything like this. No one had. Warlord Grax went perfectly still. Then a low, furious hiss came from the speakers. "You dare! Guards! Kill the human! Kill them both!" Doors slammed open around the arena rim. Zrignak guards in polished black armor poured onto the sand, their energy spears humming to life. The game was truly over. Now it was an execution. Kyle was out of time. He had one last, desperate hope. He spun around, not to fight, but to face the Grand, which was now watching the approaching guards with wary eyes. They were both targets now. He did not raise his fists. He took a deep, shaky breath, and from his throat he forced out a sound. It was a low, guttural, rumbling cough. "Caca!" The Grand froze. It wasn't a roar. It wasn't a shout. It was a word. A Gron word. A very specific one. Kyle had spent his captivity not just remembering data files, but listening. He had heard the Gron in the pits below the arena. He had memorized the sounds they made. The word he had just spoken was the Gron pup cry for stop. It was the sound of the young in danger. To an adult Gron, especially a lone one, it triggered a deep, instinctive pause. The Gron stared at Kyle, its rage replaced by utter, profound confusion. The small, hairless creature had just spoken in the forgotten language of its creche. Its mind, built for smashing and tearing, could not process. The late Zrignac guard was 10 paces away, spear leveled at Kyle's back. The Gron stood between Kyle and the guard, a mountain of conflicted instinct. It looked from the hostile guards to the human who had spoken like a lost pup. Its loyalty, its very purpose, was split. And in that frozen second of its indecision, Kyle's life and the fate of the arena hung in the balance. The hum of the energy spear was a mosquito whine next to Kyle's ear. He didn't turn. He kept his eyes locked on the Grons. In those dark, intelligent pools, he saw a storm. Rage at being caged, confusion at the human sound, a deep, ancient instinct to protect the young, even a fake one. The Zrignac guard shouted a command. "Step away, human! By the warlord's order!" Kyle ignored him. He took a slow, careful step closer to the Gron, his hands still open and empty. The beast's muscles twitched, but it did not strike. "They see a thing," Kyle said, his voice low and steady, using the simple galactic common he knew the Gron would not understand, but trusting his tone. "A toy to break. I see a warrior." He then made another sound. This one was harder, a grinding rumble he'd heard from a dominant Gron in the pits. It was not a friendly sound, but a respectful one, a challenge-acknowledged sound. "Grakun. The fight is fair." The Gron's head tilted. It was listening now, not just hearing. The guards were closing in, a half-circle of crackling spears. But the biggest threat in the arena was now neutral, a confused ally. "He wants your hide on his wall," Kale said, nodding towards Warlord Grax's box. "Or my screams in his ears. We are the same to him. Entertainment. But we do not have to be." The lead guard lost patience. With a sharp cry, he lunged, aiming his spear at Kyle's leg. Kale didn't move. He didn't have to. A gray blur shot past him. One of the Gron's lower arms, the fast-scarred one, swatted the spear aside. The weapon clattered across the sand, its energy field fizzling out. The guard stumbled back, shock on his insect-like face. The Gron had not attacked Kyle. It had attacked the threat to Kyle. A second of perfect, ringing silence held the arena. The other guards froze. The crowd was a statue garden of open mouths and wide eyes. Warlord Grax slowly stood, his claws digging into the railing of his box. The Gron placed itself squarely between Kyle and the guards. It was not fully facing them, and not fully facing Kyle. It was positioned at an angle, protecting its own back while covering the human. A tactical position, a warrior's position. It let out a new sound, not the mindless roar of before. This was a deep, chest-rumbling warning. It was the sound a Gron made when claiming a kill, telling the rest of the pack to back off. Mine. The message was unmistakable. The human was under its protection. Kyle's mind raced. The dynamic had shattered. He was no longer prey, and the Gron was no longer a mindless weapon. They were two corners of a very strange triangle, with a dozen angry guards at the third point. He saw the other Gron's eyes flick to the guards, then to the exits, then to the high walls. It was assessing escape. It was thinking. Kyle made a decision. He pointed. Not at the guards, but at the main arena gate, a huge, reinforced door where the Gron had entered. It was the only exit not swarming with Zrignaks. "There," Kyle said, making his voice firm, a commander's voice. He pointed to the gate, then made a short, chopping motion with his hand towards the 2 guards blocking it, a universal sign for move. The Gron looked at the gate. It looked at the 2 guards. It understood. Warlord Grax found his voice. It was a shriek of pure, unfiltered fury. "Kill them! Kill the beast! Kill the human! Now!" The spell broke. All the guards surged forward at once. The Gron moved. It was not the clumsy charge from the fight. This was something else. It was a whirlwind of precise, devastating violence. It used its upper arms to smash down, crushing spear shafts. It used its middle arms to grab and hurl guards into the walls. Its lower arms moved in fast, sweeping strikes to knock legs out from under them. It was not trying to kill. It was clearing a path. Kyle stayed close to the Gron's left flank, in its blind spot. The place he had learned was safe. He was not a fighter, but he was a spotter. "Left!" he yelled as a guard tried to flank them. The Gron's lower left arm shot out and swept the alien off his feet. They moved as a unit, a terrified, brilliant, desperate unit. Step by step, they fought toward the giant gate. The crowd was in an uproar, but it wasn't the cheer Grax wanted. It was a mix of terror and awe. They were not watching an execution. They were watching a mutiny. They were watching a slave and a monster become partners. They reached the gate. The 2 guards there braced themselves, spears leveled. The Gron roared and charged them. They broke and ran. The gate was shut, sealed with a heavy metal bar. The Gron slammed its shoulder into it. The metal groaned, but held. Kale looked around, desperate. His eyes landed on the control panel on the wall, a simple lever system for the arena slaves. He darted over, the Gron covering his back from pursuing guards. He pulled the lever. Nothing happened. The red glow from the walker's targeting sensor painted the Gron's heaving sides like blood. Its deep hum vibrated in Kael's teeth. This was no guard. This was Warlord Grax's final no. The arena's secret police. The walker's cannon, big enough to blast a hole through a ship's hull, lowered. It was not aimed at the Gron's center of mass. It was aimed at its legs. A crippling shot. Grax wanted his trophy back, even if it was broken. The Gron knew the sound of heavy weapons. It backed away from the gate, a low, fearful rumble in its throat. It was smart enough to know claws could not beat that. Kael's mind, frozen for a second, snapped into overdrive. He wasn't a soldier. He was a problem solver. He looked past the cannon, past the polished black armor of the machine. He looked at its joints, at the cab where the pilot sat, at the arena walls around them. The guards who had been chasing them now fell back, forming a wide circle. The show was over. The machine would end it. From his high box, Warlord Grax's voice was calm again, dripping with cold satisfaction. "You see, human, your little tricks mean nothing against real power. On your knees, now, or watch your new friend be turned to slag." Kael did not kneel. He took a step forward, putting himself between the Gron and the walker's cannon. The gesture was so insane the walker pilot paused. "You still don't understand, do you?" Kael shouted, his voice echoing in the sudden quiet. He wasn't talking to the pilot. He was talking to Grax and to the 10,000 witnesses in the stands. "You think the trophy is the beast. He turned and placed a hand flat on the Grand's scarred shoulder. The beast flinched, but did not pull away. It watched the human, waiting. "And you think the Gore would be mine?" Cale continued, looking back at the warlord's box. "You were wrong on both counts." He pointed a finger straight at Grax. "The true trophy was never in the arena sand. It was up there, in your box. Your pride, your sense of control. I captured it the moment I asked my question. And you—" Kale's voice dropped, but the speakers picked it up, carrying it everywhere. "You have been showing it off to everyone ever since." A murmur swept the crowd. They looked from the defiant human to their furious warlord. The human was right. Grax had been playing the human's game from the first answer. "And the Gore?" Kyle said, his eyes now on the assault walker. "You just brought it in yourself." He then did the last thing anyone expected. He turned his back on the walker, on the warlord, on everything. He looked up at the Gron and pointed not at the machine, but high up at the arena wall above the gate, at the massive, ancient support chains that held the giant Zrignac victory banners, and the heavy stone counterweights that balanced them. He made two sounds to the Gron. The first was the pup cry for danger from above. The second was the hunting cry for throw true. The Gron's eyes followed his finger. It saw the chains. It saw the huge, jagged block of counterweight stone, loosely held in a net of metal. It understood. The walker's pilot, tired of the speech, fired. A bolt of plasma sizzled through the air. The Gron was already moving. It didn't dodge. It scooped up a guard's discarded energy spear from the sand, not to stab, to throw. As the plasma blast seared the sand where it had stood, the Gron put all the strength of its 6 arms into a single, spinning throw. It wasn't aimed at the walker. The spear flew up, a crackling blue arc. It struck not the walker, but the metal clasp holding the net of the counterweight. The clasp shattered. With a groan of centuries-old stone, the massive counterweight broke free. It fell like a small meteor. The walker pilot looked up just in time to see 2 tons of solid rock fill his view. He tried to move. The machine was too slow. The stone smashed directly onto the walker's cockpit and shoulder assembly. There was a deafening crunch-screech of crushing metal and breaking glass. The walker's cannon arm twisted sideways, firing a wild blast into the arena wall. Then the whole machine collapsed onto its knees. Dead, a pile of expensive rubble. Silence. Then, chaos. Guards ran in panic. The crowd screamed, some in terror, some in wild revolutionary joy. The impossible had happened. The warlord's ultimate power had been broken by a stone and a stolen spear. Kyle didn't watch. He grabbed the Gron's fur and pointed to the now unblocked gate. "Go!" This time, the Gron did not hesitate. It scooped Kale up with one careful lower arm, tucking him against its side, and burst into a full, earth-shaking run through the gate and into the freedom of the service tunnels.